What's going on, guys, and welcome to episode 419 of AskGSM, here today for Wednesday, December 8, 2021. I am Graham GSM Matthews. Hope you guys are doing well and having a great week so far. If you want to send in a question to the show, you can do so by tweeting me on the Twitter machine at WrestleRant with the hashtag AskGSM. Find me on Facebook as well, facebook.com/Graham.GSM.Matthews. Drop a comment on the post that I usually put up on Tuesday nights, if not on the wall itself. And last but certainly not least, drop your question down below in the comment section on this very video. I'll include your question in next week's edition. A couple of quick things before we get started here. My interviews with NXT superstar Bron Breakker and Raw superstar Liv Morgan both went up over the last couple of days, and in addition to my interview with the executive producer from Psych, the creator of Psych, Chris Hens and Steve Franks, great interview there. That went up last night. But for the wrestling folks, my interview with Bron Breakker went up on Sunday, right ahead of War Games. Awesome chat, a lot of cool, positive feedback on that one. And then my conversation with the number one contender to the Raw Women's Championship, Liv Morgan, went up on Monday, and that was also a very cool chat as well. The Bron Breakker one is in video form. The Morgan one is in audio form. We have another interview coming up on Friday of this week, in article form as well, but in video form here on the channel with SmackDown superstar Xia Li before she makes her debut on SmackDown on Friday night. So keep an eye out for that. And as I always say, if you haven't already, please subscribe and hit that bell button to be notified every time a new video goes up, including these every single Wednesday. So let's get right into it. First, with Joe M. from YouTube, their first question was, do you think it would be fair to say that Dean Ambrose was a bigger star than Jon Moxley? Everything about how big the Shield was, say what you want about his booking, but he was nearly always involved in some sort of title picture, fighting some of the biggest names in the industry along the way, and he rarely didn't receive a big babyface reaction from the crowd. In contrast, I don't think the buzz around him in AEW compares to that of CM Punk or MJF or even a Darby Allin or Jungle Boy. That's a great question, which is why I'm putting that as the title of this video, the main focus of this video. And we got a lot of great questions this week. But as far as Dean Ambrose versus Moxley goes, I would argue that you're right. And a big reason as to why that is because WWE is just a bigger company. Always has been, always will be. Not better, and from a creative standpoint, I'm talking about bigger, more people know who the Shield was than some of these AEW guys. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who only watch WWE, who just don't know there was other wrestling out there or only conditioned to watch WWE, that thought Jon Moxley or Dean Ambrose, whatever, retired, and then he was done. I see a lot of people say that about like TNA, for example. When Kurt Angle left WWE in the mid-2000s in 2006 and went to TNA, Rob Van Dam, same thing. They were in TNA for several years. In Kurt's case, he was there for almost a decade. And he would still get comments at airports and stuff like that. Hey, why did you stop wrestling? When are you coming back to WWE? When are you going to get back into wrestling? And he's like, I'm wrestling every single Thursday on Spike. And Impact was doing more viewers back then than AEW is now. And obviously AEW's only been around for a few years. TNA was around for a while by that point. But still, the same principle applies. Not everyone. I feel like the internet has gotten more people aware of what AEW is and the fact they're around. We're talking about like the most casual viewers possible that only know of Raw on Monday nights. And if they don't have a Twitter account, following these people on Instagram or whatever, following Jon Moxley or whatever on IG, then they have no idea that he wrestles elsewhere right now. The same goes for Chris Jericho, Punk, Bryan, people like that. I don't know how much of the majority or minority that is. Probably not the majority, definitely. I mean, the viewing audience between Raw and AEW isn't really that drastic. Nowadays, it's a couple 100,000 people. Not like 100 or 200,000, but it's not millions of people. It's not like 1 million people are watching Dynamite and 5 million are watching Raw. It's kind of narrowing the margin there a little bit, narrowing the gap in the last year or so, I would say. But back to Moxley versus Ambrose. I feel like he was a bigger star in WWE, but there's a lot of things you got to account for here. In AEW, he was a big reason that, he was a big factor in getting AEW on the map. He came out on their first ever pay-per-view, Double or Nothing 2019. RJ and I were there. It was a great moment. It was a great reaction. Really set the stage for the run that he would have. He's been booked great for the most part. I really can't complain about Jon Moxley's booking. It's not like he's been underutilized or anything like that. He came in with a bang. They followed up on that. They did the Kenny Omega match. He won that in the main event of their Full Gear pay-per-view. And back in 2019, won the AEW World Championship on the subsequent pay-per-view. Was champion for the better part, almost for the entirety of 2020. And part of the reason why he didn't feel like a bigger star at that point and wasn't having like a better reign. And I thoroughly enjoyed Moxley's reign, honestly. I think it's up there with Omega's as far as like the matches he was having. I feel like he defended the championship more regularly than Omega did. That's not a knock on Omega or AEW or whatever. He's a heel champion. It's a bit different. But with Moxley, though, he was having championship defenses every single couple of weeks. I mean, there's only 4 pay-per-views a year for that company, but he was having defenses on TV against Darby Allin and Lance Archer, Jake Hager at one point, among other people. Brian Cage on television. Omega wasn't really doing a whole lot of that while he was champion, which again is fine. But nonetheless, though, the pandemic really hurt his reign because there weren't any fans in the audience. He wasn't getting those rock star reactions anymore. But when they came back with fans earlier this year, he was still getting pretty big babyface reactions. So what you said about how, he rarely didn't receive a big babyface reaction from the crowd, it's the exact same thing in AEW. So I'm not really, you said, in contrast, the buzz may not be the same as a Punk or an MJF or a Bryan or an Allen or a Jungle Boy, but you're talking right now, I think. If we're talking in 2019, Jon Moxley was probably the most buzzed about person in that company. I mean, honestly, and maybe aside from maybe Omega, but even then, though, I feel like Omega really didn't come into his own in the ring until he became champion and turned heel, and the Elite thing came about, whatever. I feel like with Jon Moxley, he was really the biggest star in that company for the first 18 months. We can't discredit that. I mean, he was champion for a long time. He was having kick-ass matches that got people talking, whether they liked them or not. Some very good matches with Omega, very good matches with Moxley, MJF, Eddie Kingston, among other people. Even Pac and other people like that on television. So, yeah, I feel like with Moxley, he was a bigger star in WWE, but again, you have to account for the fact he was there for almost a decade. He signed with them in 2010, 2011, arrived on the main roster in the main event of a pay-per-view, a lot like in AEW, but back in WWE, he wasn't an established commodity by that point. But he debuted with The Shield. The Shield is one of the greatest factions of all time because that made all 3 members involved stars and main event players. And he didn't have the most exciting WWE title reign, but as you mentioned, he was always getting big reactions. And you're asking me if he's a bigger star in which company? I would say WWE just because it was a bigger company. He was involved at the top more often than not. But being at the top of WWE is not the same as being involved at the top of an AEW or with the roles reversed there. AEW is a great company, but more people are going to know who the Universal and WWE champion are before they know who is holding the AEW championship. That is a fact. More people are going to know who Roman Reigns and Big E are before they know who Adam Page is. A lot of people will know Adam Page, but because it's just WWE, honestly, I'm sure the fact that people probably know more about Jinder Mahal than they do Adam Page, because Jinder was champion at one point in WWE for a good stretch of time. Dean Ambrose wasn't when he was in WWE. He was champion for all of a month or maybe 3 months, from June to September of 2016. But like you said, with the Shield, he was always at the top of the card, having big matches with John Cena, Seth Rollins, Randy Orton, Roman Reigns, among other people. His booking has been better in AEW. He has absolutely been utilized better in AEW than he was in WWE. If you wanted to make the argument that he had better matches in WWE than he did in AEW, that is definitely disputable, because I've seen people say that he's regressed in the ring in AEW, which again, I feel like is arguable. He's wrestling more of a hardcore style. I mean, he's had a shit ton of street fights in this company with the death match with Moxley, the death match with Archer on TV, the unsanctioned Lights Out match with Joey Janela back in 2019, Omega as well, Full Gear. He's having a lot more hardcore matches, even with Darby Allin on AEW TV, that no disqualification match. Eddie Kingston as well in the main event of Full Gear in 2020. People don't like that. I don't love it, but I feel like he's still having great matches. He had the Lights Out tag team match with Kingston against Suzuki and Archer in New York City a few months ago. In WWE, he had some kick-ass matches, but he was wrestling a different style. It was definitely watered down. I mean, you really can't, unlike Rollins and Reigns, in my opinion anyway, Ambrose wasn't having as many great matches in the ring as those guys were. They're probably just better. I mean, Roman just was involved in bigger matches, but Ambrose, I mean, he had amazing matches with Rollins, but beyond that, though, I feel like the AJ matches were great, but a lot of his matches just kind of felt underwhelming. The Bray Wyatt matches were fairly underwhelming. The Brock match was underwhelming at WrestleMania 32. The Jericho matches were pretty good. They weren't amazing, but they were pretty good. The Roman match they had at Survivor Series 2015 was underwhelming. His U.S. title reign really didn't produce a lot of exciting matches. The Shield obviously had some amazing matches, but I'm talking about Ambrose on his own. So honestly, I could probably point to more memorable matches that he has had in AEW than he's had in WWE. But again, back to the original point to wrap this up. Bigger star, I would go more people will know Dean Ambrose than Jon Moxley. And that's just a fact. Give it another 5-10 years, provided how long he wrestles for, obviously. We don't know. But he's only been in AEW for a little less than 3 years. He was in WWE for a lot longer than that. And he became a big star over there for the 7 years that he was on the main roster. So ask me again in about 5 years, maybe, if he's still wrestling by that point. I will probably still say Dean Ambrose, because in the peak of his career, his peak prime years, he was in WWE and having a lot of success. But even now, he's doing great work, and I wish him the best. Hopefully he's back at some point, happy and healthy. And happy birthday to him as well. I believe it was his birthday just yesterday. So happy birthday to Jon Moxley. Joe's second question here. A few years ago, I would have faith in LA Knight being a Vince McMahon guy. But after EC3 was basically the worst call-up ever, I'm not so sure. So how do you rate his chances of becoming a top guy on the main roster? Not very good at all. You said top guy? I laugh at that. I laugh at the idea of them actually treating LA Knight as anything of note on the main roster at all, let alone a top guy. I mean, the fact they're looking at ages now, they go through these phases where they see ages and it's like, oh, they're too old for us, blah, blah, blah. And then they'll go through phases where that doesn't matter, and it's good news for us because they bring in a guy like AJ Styles, who I believe was 39 when he first came into WWE. And obviously he went on to have amazing success, and he has been one of the guys as a top star. Obviously, LA Knight isn't an AJ Styles, but if the age factor wasn't a factor, I do think he would be a top guy on either Raw or SmackDown. Now, I did feel the same way about Bobby Roode a few years ago. He had great success in NXT, got called up and did practically nothing. I mean, he's a former tag team champion, United States champion. He hasn't been a complete failure, but I really feel like when Roode first came into the company and they called him up in 2017, he could have been a top heel on either brand. Like it screams to me like a WWE guy. He's not a super indie guy. He was in TNA for 10 years. Longer than that, actually. 10, 15 years. But I still feel like he could have had a lot more success than he did as a top guy in the company. LA Knight, to me, fits that bill as a guy who's not going to go in there and have this amazing in-ring classic, although he did play his role perfectly in War Games. He's had a lot of good matches. The Cameron Grimes matches were great. He can certainly hold his own in the ring. But LA Knight, I don't think, is known for his in-ring ability. He's known for being a character and more so a talker. That is right up Vince's alley, or at least it was at one point. But again, because he's been elsewhere, because he's on the older side now, I feel like that's why they won't even call him up. I mean, what reason did they have to not bring this guy up to a Raw or a SmackDown in the draft back in October? It's not like he was involved in anything of note on NXT, and even then it doesn't matter. I mean, they called up fucking Isaiah Swerve Scott when he was the North American champion. They called up Karrion Kross when he was still the NXT champion. Whether LA Knight was involved in something of note or not, and that was well after the Cameron Grimes feud ended, and he was doing the job on NXT to Braun Breaker and other people, you got to get over the future, but LA Knight is bigger than that. The guy should not be on NXT right now. I like his feud with Grayson Waller. It's a fine use for him. It's a fine use of LA Knight to get Grayson Waller over. But he could be doing so much bigger and better things right now on the main roster. I mean, that's in an ideal world where they would actually book him correctly. I don't have any faith. At least in NXT, he's on the show. He's doing some stuff. He just main evented their War Games show. On the main roster, would he be on main event? Would he be on SmackDown at all? I don't know. I mean, he should be. But yeah, like you said, I have zero faith that they would actually treat him like a success at all on the main roster, let alone a top guy. I mean, the chances of that happening are slim to none. But then again, I wondered the same thing about Damian Priest, who's also on the older side, and there's no real rhyme or reason why they push certain people. Because Damian Priest is older, yet he's been one of the best, if not the best booked guy all year, aside from maybe Roman Reigns. Priest has had an amazing 2021. U.S. champion since SummerSlam, a lot of great matches, great moments. He's been protected. Why can't we get that for a guy like LA Knight? And I honestly do feel like the Bruce Pritchard influence is part of it. I looked it up the other day because I was curious. Bruce Pritchard left Impact. He was involved in Impact for a little while in 2017. Prior to 2017, LA Knight, at that point Eli Drake, was having a lot of success in Impact. 2016, he really came into his own. He was their Legends champion for a while, or whatever it was called at that point. The Grand Slam champion, I don't fucking know. But he had some championship, had a lot of success with it. He went on to feud with the EC3, get some world championship opportunities. At the onset of 2017, he's doing nothing. He's barely on the show. They're barely using him. He was doing absolutely nothing at Impact. Who came into creative at that point? Bruce Pritchard. LA Knight does nothing of note for the next 6 months while Bruce Pritchard is there. Bruce Pritchard leaves Impact in August of 2017. That literal same month when Bruce Pritchard leaves, Eli Drake becomes Impact World Champion, a championship he would go on to hold for the next 4 to 5 months. I mean, honestly, I really feel like it's a Bruce Pritchard problem. He's not going to say that because he works there currently. But I feel like when the inevitable day comes where LA Knight gets let go, he does the shoot interview, he's going to mention there was a lot like Nick Aldis. Nick Aldis is another guy I never really understood why WWE would never pick him up. I mean, it was a different story 5-6 years ago. But Bruce Pritchard's there now. I don't know if Bruce Pritchard's a Nick Aldis guy or not. He might be. Maybe it's Triple H or John Cena that don't like Nick Aldis. I don't know. But I know, not for a fact, but my speculation is that Bruce Pritchard is not an LA Knight guy. He does not like LA Knight. He feels he's too old. He feels like he's got attitude issues, whatever. Because otherwise, why the fuck would you not call him up in the draft? But like you said, I don't even know if he's going to make it to the main roster. If he does, it'll be a miracle if he's actually booked correctly. As even a solid mid-card guy. Him as Intercontinental or United States champion specifically would be perfect. That would be a great use of him. He doesn't even have to be a top guy at this point in his career. I think those days are over. I mean, the time of that happening might have been 4 or 5 years ago when he was still in his prime and he was in Impact, but he chose to stay, which is fine. Kind of missed his window there. But still, I feel like he'd be a guy that would be perfectly fit for an AEW, or I mean for AEW as well, but for specifically WWE. And I just feel like with the way they operate now, it's just not going to happen. So that ship has sailed in my mind already. So if he even makes it to the main roster, for him to have any small bit of success as a second-level guy would be a miracle. That is all I'm hoping for at this point, but I'm not expecting it because of how the company works nowadays, all the releases we've gotten this year, and how they're kind of looking towards the younger guys, which is fine, but I feel like there is a use for a guy like LA Knight on a Raw or SmackDown right now. No L from Facebook. What would be your top 5 Christmas songs? I don't know if I've ever answered this one before, but maybe we'll be cranking up the music tonight. Alexis and I are going to be making Christmas cookies, watching a movie potentially. I have a long list of Christmas movies I watch every year. She mentioned The Grinch. I usually watch that on Christmas itself with my family, but Christmas Vacation, maybe, that's a possibility, among many other options. I spoke about this last week with RJ about the movies, but you're asking about favorite Christmas songs. So I wrote down 6. You really can't go wrong, in my opinion, with any Christmas song, except for Little Drummer Boy. A lot of people like that song. I think it's fucking dumb. I get why it's it's a nice innocent song. It does nothing for me. It kills the mood. It doesn't have to be cool, but like, when I listen to Christmas music, I want to get hyped up for the holiday. Not sit there and like, oh, you're a little drummer. Like, I fucking hate that song. Not every song is super upbeat. Like, Last Christmas by Wham is very low-key. That's one of my favorite Christmas songs, though. I've really loved that song. It's really grown on me in the last couple of years. That's such a great song. And it's not super upbeat, but it gets me in the Christmas mode. The Akakaliki Maka song that's in Christmas Vacation, that's such a great Christmas song. I think I wrote down more than 5 here, but that's another one. The Christmas Vacation song itself, that's the theme song from the movie, but that's still a great Christmas song. I would count that. Jingle Bell Rock, can't go wrong with that. Can't go wrong with any of the classics. Jingle Bells, Santa Claus is coming to town, blah, blah, blah. But I'm talking about the more songs here, okay? So Last Christmas, the Akakaliki Maka song, the Christmas Vacation song, Jingle Bell Rock, Obviously, All I Want for Christmas Is You. I can understand people feeling that's overrated, but I think a majority of people like it. I've always liked that song. It gets played way too fucking much, but it's still an awesome song. It's an amazing song. I can understand why people love it so much. That will get you hyped up for Christmas. Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree, another classic. The Most Wonderful Time of Year, another really classic, good Christmas song. And Santa Claus Is Coming to Town by the Jackson 5. That's another great one as well. I'm sure there's more I'm not thinking of, and that's more than 5, but those are among my favorites. Also from No L from Facebook, do you see Johnny Wrestling going to AEW? I don't. As I've said for a while, my gut feeling is that he stays, and I feel that same way coming out of last night's promo. Now, he did say he would be doing stuff here and there. That, to me, I mean, him coming back on and off in NXT until his son or daughter is born in February would just be dumb. I feel like last night's Swan Song should be it for him for a while in NXT. For him to come back anytime soon, even if it's next month or something, I feel like would be stupid. If he comes back to NXT, which is my expectation, maybe not just NXT, but like WWE in general, I really do feel like he will re-sign with WWE. I feel like him in AEW would be fucking cool. The problem is I just don't see a spot for him there right now. Now, if Ciampa gets free and they reunite DIY in AEW and then we get Revival and DIY matches again, now that's a different story. But still, that was... those were different times, and I don't know if Ciampa would want to leave. I mean, he probably is on his way out as well when his contract is up. I don't know. But yeah, with Gargano, I could totally see him doing indie stuff for right now, like popping up at the Northeast wrestling scene, all across the country, doing like pop-ups and meet and greets. I feel like Evolve would be perfect if that was actually still running before they closed down. Stuff like that, though. I feel like he'll be doing stuff like that until his... newborn is born in February with Candice, and he'll be taking time off from there. And then he'll probably reevaluate in the spring around WrestleMania time. And my gut feeling, again, is that he will be back, whether it be in NXT, which is great for NXT, I guess, and maybe it'll be a better show than it is right now. And I really enjoyed War Games, but I feel like, again, he's done all there is to do there, and I feel like it would ruin the great farewell that he got the last couple of days between War Games and what we saw last night. I don't really want to see him back in NXT right now, or anytime soon for that matter. He talked about betting on himself. I think the real bet on himself would be to go elsewhere, like an Impact or, an AEW or whatever. The main roster would also be betting on yourself, but the problem there is that there's really no room for growth. I honestly have no expectation of them actually utilizing him as the star that he is. And he's one of the best in the world, I would say. Maybe not the top 3, but Johnny Gargano is quite amazing. I mean, the guy has had match of the year after match of the year for the last 5 or 6 years now. Maybe not in recent years, but definitely back in 2016, 17, 18, the guy with 19 as well, was having some of the best matches all year. And if WWE didn't want him at that point on the main roster, and I know he wanted to stay in NXT, but honestly, though, if they really wanted him, they would have gotten him by now. So they'll probably want to re-sign him just to ensure he stays around. He sticks around and doesn't go to the competition. I would love to see him try his hand in AEW, even if it doesn't work out, or do what Matt Cardona did and just go there for a couple of one-shots and then go back to WWE or do something else. But we'll see. My gut feeling is that he stays in WWE, but if he tries his hand elsewhere, I'm very excited to see what he does. At Reborn Again, John Ritland from the Twitter machine. Check out his YouTube show as well, Real Honesty with John Ritland. Does great work and has great content. His first question was, is there any chance WWE has Liv Morgan win the Raw Women's Championship from Becky Lynch down the road, or will she simply be a placeholder feud? That's a great question. Now, the problem is that I would love to say, first of all, I had no issue with her losing on Monday. A lot of people were all up in arms about that. Becky shouldn't be losing at this point. I mean, honestly, I know it was the main event of Raw. They built it up as a big deal. People were really overreacting. Like, oh, they fucking killed her push and got to give the people what they want. Becky has been champion every day that she's been active since WrestleMania 35. It would have been a big deal if Liv won on Monday, and I would have been stoked for her. But I feel like at this point, they may as well just keep the belt on Becky until WrestleMania. I don't think Liv was ever going to have a long run. If Liv won on Monday, she probably would have lost it right back to Becky. Don't even do that. Just continue to build up Liv. My fear is absolutely, realistically, will they continue to with Liv, will they continue to push her? Will she continue to be featured? They have with Bianca, but Bianca's a bigger star than Liv. But Liv is well on her way. That is the fear here. That once they take you out of the title picture, are you done, dead, and buried? Now, Rhea Ripley doesn't feel remotely as special now as she did 6 months ago, but she was still tag team champion. She's still on the show for the most part. It's not like some of these women, I mean, the women's division is smaller than the men's division, obviously, but some of these people hold the championship, and then they're never really booked like a top star again. Like Naomi, for example, had a great 2017, and she's had success in recent years, but she never really... The problem with Naomi was that she still is very talented. I'm enjoying her, Sonya Deville feud. But they never put the belt back on her. They never really entertained the idea. Natalya, same thing. And Natalya is different because I don't give a fuck about Natalya. But Naomi really should have been champion again after 2017. She was champion twice that year, but that was almost 5 years ago now. She's really popular. She was never featured at that level again. Alexa Bliss has been. She's very talented. They see her as a bigger star. Obviously the 4 Horsewomen will always be in the title picture no matter what. Bianca, I feel like, is at that level where she's not bulletproof, but, I don't have a fear that she won't be back in the title picture at some point, whether it be in 6 months or a year, by WrestleMania, whatever. With Liv, I don't know. We don't know yet. It's really all a matter of the aftermath. I am worried, but is she going to come back and beat her for the championship? I don't think she will. The thing is that you can't please everyone. I said a month ago, even though Bianca lost to Becky on Raw, Bianca had to be the one to beat Becky because of the story they told and the fact she lost to her in 26 seconds. If Bianca never beats Becky, she looks like a loser. Again, that's why I say she's not bulletproof, because the 4 Horsewomen, they would always give them their win back. Bianca, she is feeding the Doudrop right now, and that's a fine use of her, and hopefully they go back to her and Becky at some point, even if she's not champion. But if she never beats Becky, she looks like a loser. Liv, kind of, but she wasn't beaten in 26 seconds. I mean, Becky has berated her and talked shit about her and called her a loser, and she was kind of proven right. But the thing with Becky was that she cheated to win. She didn't cheat to beat Bianca. They could tell that story all they want. Replay the fucking footage at SummerSlam. She beat her in 26 seconds clean as a sheet. That was stupid. That was dumb. I feel stronger about Bianca being the person to beat Becky than I am about Liv. But if Liv went on to win the Royal Rumble and beat Becky at WrestleMania, I wouldn't complain because Liv has improved a lot, and I think she'd be a fine champion, a fine choice to beat Becky for that title. Rhea Ripley's another one. People are going to say, well, what about Rhea Ripley? You got to have her be the one to beat Becky because she can benefit a lot from it. She's never been Raw Women's Champion, but they've never had a formal feud, and she could really benefit from it. So she's another one. To me, it's got to come down to one of those 3 women, which is obvious because they're on the Raw roster, and I mean, I guess you could have someone from NXT come up or SmackDown, but they've already called up a lot of people. A lot of people they're already not doing shit with. Toni Storm is in the title picture right now over on SmackDown, but the feud sucks. We'll get to that in a second, but they haven't done jack shit with her. Shotzi they called up. She and Tegan did well. They fired Tegan, which made no fucking sense. But Shotzi got that mini push with Sasha, and it might be already over. I mean, we haven't really seen her on the show at all since Survivor Series, so at any rate, with Liv, I'm not confident that they'll go back to this, have her beat Becky. And even if she doesn't have to beat Becky. I feel like Bianca, you can make a bigger start of Liv, but from a storyline standpoint, I feel like Bianca makes more sense. Liv, we don't know. If she goes on to not be on the show for the next 6 months, she's on main event still, doing shit like that, then I would be worried. John's second question. So based on what you said about Hard Times 2, it seems like the NWA is spinning its wheels and perhaps even going backwards as far as quality. Is there anything they can do to gain momentum? I mean, I thought it was a fine show, completely missable. I thought the 73 show and Empower were much better. It wasn't a bad show. I've seen worse NWA shows. The biggest problem with the NWA, as we talked about before, is that Power has absolutely nothing to do with the pay-per-views. They built up all these feuds and matches on Power leading up to 73 and Empower, and they just went nowhere. None of it even mattered. Now, there were some stuff on Power that were furthered and culminated at the pay-per-view or continued at the pay-per-view, but a majority of the card was completely random and wasn't even mentioned on Power before the show. You would have to watch social media in order to know that Austin Aries and Rhett Titus was added to the card because they weren't on Power at all. They didn't even show a video package for the match on Power itself, so it was completely random among other matches. Like Mickie James and Kiera Hogan. They've had a feud on Power, but that wasn't announced on Power, I don't think, up until the day of the show itself. So anyway, I don't think it was a terrible show. It was cool seeing Matt Cardona pop up. Fandango's a good get for them. Dirty Dango, Curtis, whatever his new name is. Continuing to bring people in like that. I mean, they're not CM Punk, but fresh faces will help. Any fresh faces they can get will help. I think Chris Adonis has been great for them since he started in the NWA earlier this year. They need newer faces because a lot of the people that had a lot of promise left. You know, people like Ricky Starks and Eddie Kingston and LA Knight, the former Eli Drake. They got James Storm back. He wasn't at the show, but he was back in the NWA for a little bit late last year. But at any rate, as far as, you know, the NWA itself goes, I feel like they need new fresh faces, and to really get something going, they need more consistent booking. A lot of their booking is very questionable, or they'll do a main event like Mike Knox and fucking Trevor Murdoch. That makes no sense, had no build-up, and completely came out of nowhere. I don't pay to see Mike Knox in a pay-per-view main event in 2021. I guess you could say the same thing about Trevor Murdoch, but he's a great character and he's a great fit for them. Mike Knox isn't bad, but he's not NWA World Heavyweight Champion worthy. Matt Cardona doing his thing and doing something similar to what he did in GCW is honestly going to be probably as good as it gets for them. Anyone else, I'm not really sure who else would want to go to the NWA, but continuing to build, you know, working relationships with Impact and Ring of Honor for what's left of it anyway, and hopefully rekindling that relationship with AEW and getting some of their women talent back on the show. Kiera Hogan's been in the NWA for a while now. You know, people like, I don't even know, but like FTR, for example. Not that the NWA is a top priority for them, but I feel like them in the NWA would be fucking perfect. Would just be absolutely perfect. So if they can continue to form working relationships, bring in fresh faces, and above all else, do consistent storytelling, then I feel like they'll have a better chance of regaining that momentum they had 2 years ago. And making Power more must-see as it was 2 years ago, because nowadays it's completely pointless. His next question, which company do you feel has had more pay-per-view quality matches on their big shows this year, WWE or AEW, and why? Great question. Now, obviously WWE has had bigger shows. They have, you know, more pay-per-views than AEW. But still, it's a toss-up, because I feel like a lot of people are tempted to say AEW, obviously, because AEW is the better company, but creatively right now. But WWE's had a lot of great, honestly, a lot of their pay-per-views this year have not been bad. Even some of the ones without fans were not bad. Like Elimination Chamber and Fastlane were completely inconsequential. But even on those shows, like Fastlane had that great Drew and Sheamus match. Elimination Chamber had the two great Elimination Chamber matches. Rumble was a damn good show. I really enjoyed the Rumbles this year. I thought Roman and Kevin Owens had a great match on that show. WrestleMania had a lot of great matches between both nights. The Triple Threat Universal title main event was excellent, one of my favorite matches all year. Sasha and Bianca had an excellent match at WrestleMania Night 1 for WrestleMania 37. Seth Rollins and Cesaro had a great match on Night 1, was that, or 2? I don't remember, but they had a great match. Backlash had Roman Reigns and Cesaro. Great match there. Money in the Bank had the Money in the Bank matches. They also had Rhea and Charlotte fucking kill it in the undercard. Hell in the Cell had the Bobby and Drew Hell in the Cell match, which was great. I'm trying to think what else. Even some of the more recent shows. You know, Extreme Rules had that really good triple threat with Priest and Hardy and Sheamus. Balor and Roman I didn't love, but it was still a very good match. Crown Jewel I thought was a great show. Edge and Rollins had a great match. I really enjoyed Roman and Brock. That was a great show overall. Becky, Bianca, and Sasha had a terrific match. What else did we get this year? Survivor Series, Becky and Charlotte was great. Big E and Roman had a very good main event. So WWE's had more shows and they've had great matches, but you can't discount AEW either. If you're a big WWE fan, you can't shit on AEW for their pay-per-view quality matches this year. I mean, they've had 4 pay-per-views, but let's look at those pay-per-views. Full Gear had the main event of Omega versus Page. Still not as great of a match as that was, still not as good as MJF and Darby Allin from the opening of that show. That was a fantastic match. Bryan Danielson and Miro, great match. FTR and the Lucha Brothers, great match. Then you go to All Out. All Out was one of the best shows ever, honestly. One of the best pay-per-views in the past decade. But that show had an amazing Bucks versus Bucks versus Lucha Brothers match for the tag team titles inside the steel cage. A very good Omega and Christian Cage main event. It had a very good opener between Eddie Kingston and was that the opener? I think so. Eddie Kingston and Miro for the TNT title. Britt Baker and Chris Statlander had a kick-ass match on that show. Even Jericho and MJF was decent. What else was on that show? Oh, Punk and Darby had a great match, obviously. As for Double or Nothing in May, I love the Bucks against Kingston and Moxley. I thought that was my favorite match of the show. Stadium Stampede was enjoyable enough. I really liked Omega, Pac, and Cassidy in the three-way for the title. That was a great match. As far as Revolution goes, I thought Revolution had a couple of good matches too. Moxley versus Omega, the death match was not my cup of tea exactly, but it was still pretty good overall. Sting's in a ring return for the first time in like 5 or 6 years. Great match there with them and Darby against Team Taz. The Bucks against Jericho and MJF, and that show was pretty good. Yeah, I feel like AEW's had a lot of great matches too. It really is tied though. Honestly, I mean, I might give the slight edge to WWE just because they have more pay-per-views and more matches to choose from. Because people are going to shit on WWE, oh, the product sucks this year, which largely, honestly, like it did. More so for Raw than SmackDown. Maybe not recently, but definitely overall. But they had, I mean, when it mattered most on pay-per-view, they had some pretty good shows, and they had some pretty great matches. Not every one of those matches was better than the Bucks versus the Lucha Bros, for example, from All Out. I might give the slight edge to WWE. Now, AEW is the better pay-per-views. But you asked me which company had, what did you say, more pay-per-view quality matches? By the sheer volume of pay-per-views that WWE does, the answer is WWE. I mean, AEW had some great pay-per-views this year, specifically Full Gear and All Out. Might have been 2 of their best pay-per-views ever. But I feel like I can name more matches on pay-per-view and better matches that WWE had this year than AEW did. So, by the slight edge, and the AEW marks are going to hate me for that. We're all marks here, obviously, but the AEW diehards are going to kill me for that one, but I feel like the answer is WWE. Sorry. At Iwagu91 from Twitter, their first question was, while it's felt that Kyle O'Reilly will go to AEW, if Johnny Gargano does leave WWE, where do you think he'll go? Well, I already talked about this earlier, but of the two, I totally see Kyle O'Reilly going to AEW. I mean, he would be a fool to stay. Unless the money is too good to pass up in WWE and they're offering him $1 million fucking to stay. To do what? I don't know. And even if it's to sit on the sidelines for $1 million, I mean, you would be hard pressed to say no to that type of money unless you're in that position, you know. If you're in that position, it's hard to say no to something like that. But I don't think they're paying Kyle O'Reilly $1 million to stay in WWE. That being said, he would be better off going to AEW. I mean, his buddies are over there, Adam Cole, Bobby Fish. He just has a much higher ceiling over there than he does in WWE. And I know, he's not going to win the AEW World Championship, nor should he. But I could see Kyle O'Reilly obviously back with Bobby Fish as Red Dragon, but even on his own at some point, maybe as a TNT champion. I feel like that would be a perfect fit for him. He has conquered NXT. He's not going to win the NXT Championship. Him as a single star was going well up until the NXT 2.0 relaunch, and he's done absolutely fucking nothing on that show. Him teaming with Von Wagner was terrible. Just terrible. So I'm glad he's hopefully moving on. Hopefully he does not re-sign. With Gargano, like I said, I do assume ultimately he will stay. But if he doesn't, for now, I could see him doing indie stuff. The Beyond Wrestlings and I don't know about GCW, but, stuff like that. Would he sign with an AEW or an Impact? Like I said before, I would like to see him be one of those free agents where it pops up wherever he wants. He goes to GCW or goes to Impact for a couple of shots or to AEW for a couple of matches. I feel like that would be perfect. Is it going to happen? Probably not. But I feel like that would be the best use of his time and effort and all that other stuff. Again, they're probably offering him a decent amount of money to stay in WWE. Because at some point he would be a great trainer for an NXT. And he loves NXT so much that it would be a perfect fit for him. But with that being said, though, I feel like Gargano in any of those other companies would also be awesome. So it's really up in the air right now. He said as much in his promo last night. I'm very interested and excited to see what he does next. For now, I assume he lays low until his newborn is born in February, as he said. And then from there, probably make a decision as to where he wants to sign ultimately, if anywhere. Like I said, he could just be a freelance indie guy that goes wherever he wants, and that might be just as enjoyable or fulfilling, gratifying, whatever, as it would be with him staying in WWE or going to AEW. His next question, much like I asked about if the 24/7 and the women's tag team titles should be scrapped, do you think the same should be said for the NXT Cruiserweight title? Absolutely. I mean, it's long overdue. There is no Cruiserweight division anymore. It's funny, too, because, they were reporting, I think it was Fightful. Not that they reported inaccurate information, but this was well before they blew up NXT into what it is now. But back in June, they were reporting, the Cruiserweight division is going to get a major revamp. It's going to be a major focal point going forward. That's why we did the whole Kushida and Kyle O'Reilly match and Roderick Strong versus Kushida, blah, blah, blah. But beyond that, upon NXT 2.0 getting the relaunch that it did, the Cruiserweight division has been dead in the water. I mean, it was literally like 3 or 4 weeks after that report came out. They fired the entire roster. Tyler Breeze, Fandango, the Singh brothers, Tony Nese, Arya Daivari, not Grayson Waller, who was on 205 Live for a while, but he's outgrown that now. Ike Manjiro was in the division. He's like in the tag team ranks now. I forgot the other guy's name. Asher Hale, the guy they cut. August Gray, they fired. I'm forgetting some of these names now. Ari Sterling, who is now Alex Zane, or was Alex Zane before he came to WWE, they fired him too, among other people. So, with that being said, they're better just getting rid of the thing. And it's not even worth like rebranding it and giving it a new name. They already have the North American Championship. They don't really need the Cruiserweight Championship on that show anymore. It's just the total prop. It hasn't been defended in a while beyond War Games on Sunday. Just get rid of it. Even as an open weight title, that's not a bad idea. But I feel like with the roster NXT has, they don't need another championship. So just get rid of it altogether, in my opinion. It has not really meant much in a very long time. Your thoughts on heel Bryan Danielson on AEW? He's been fucking awesome. He's been killing it. The cool thing about Bryan is that he can kill it as a babyface and he can kill it as a heel. And that's been evident over the last month. He can get people to cheer him, he can get people to boo him. When he's working with the right people, he can play whatever fucking role he wants to. And the guy's brilliant in either role. Heel Bryan has been awesome at AEW lately. It has single-handedly got me excited for that Adam Page match, which I would have already been looking forward to anyway. But babyface Bryan versus babyface Hangman just doesn't have the same level of energy that a heel Bryan and a babyface Hangman does. So the dynamic is great, the feud's been great, and I'm looking forward to that match next Wednesday on Winter is Coming. At Kyle Rochelle 19 from Twitter, their question was, what are they doing right now on SmackDown? Because it's not good, he says. The Charlotte Flair Tony Storm feud is not interesting. And Becky and Liv I'm into. To me, Raw is better than SmackDown. It's just the Roman Reigns show. What can they do to change that? I would agree right now Raw has been better for the last couple of weeks than SmackDown. I would agree with that. And I do agree the most compelling thing on SmackDown right now is the is the Universal Championship picture. Charlotte and Tony should be a slam dunk as a feud that should be interesting. It's just not. It's fresh. The match should be great. The feud has sucked. The feud has been terrible. The tag team title picture has been nearly non-existent. The New Day are back in the title picture now. They have barely any teams on SmackDown. You talk about Raw not having any teams. SmackDown has literally almost no teams. And, they have Corbin and Moss, and I like Happy Corbin, but Nakamura being involved in a tag team mid-card feud, who gives a shit? Who cares? The IC title's a complete prop at this point. The women's title, the feud has sucked. The tag titles haven't been defended in a while. And the Universal title feels like, obviously, the most important prize on the show. Anything involving Roman is usually great, and I'm enjoying the Brock stuff. And they have a lot of possibilities with where they can go with the Universal title picture with Drew and Jeff, hopefully at some point. But beyond that, it's a very desolate show. There's not a lot worth getting excited over, as you mentioned. How can they change that? Better stories. They have a very good roster. I mean, letting go of Hit Row, for example, was fucking stupid. They got to start putting new people over. Sasha and Shayna had a very good match. But Sasha gains nothing from beating Shayna clean. Absolutely nothing. They can have a great feud, but it's hard to take people like Shayna seriously when they lose to people like Sasha and Charlotte all the time. I'm enjoying the Naomi-Sonya thing. They got to hurry that up. They're doing supposedly the match on Friday. Whether that actually happens or not, who knows. But that's been nice. But beyond that, it really has been a dead show for the last couple of weeks. So they have a good roster. Just use that roster better. Make the Intercontinental Championship more important. Give us more tag teams. Call people up and don't fucking fire them. I know, what a concept. Again, the Roman stuff I'm into. Everything else on the show is just not there right now. They need to do a better job of creating more compelling stories. And Raw isn't a great show, but I thought the last couple of weeks has been a positive show for the most part. I like the Becky and Liv stuff. Becky's been doing great work as the Raw Women's Champion. The complete opposite of Charlotte right now, who in the ring is fine, but her character work has been completely terrible. Whoever she has worked with, she has not elevated them at all. Becky is the complete opposite, I feel. But I've liked the Becky and Liv stuff. They have a tag team tournament going on right now to crown new number one contenders to the tag team titles. I'm digging the WWE Championship picture. I like Kevin Owens turning heel. That's a positive. Edge and Miz, I like that feud quite a bit. Bianca's got her thing going on right now with Doudrop. So there are more things on Raw right now worth getting invested in than SmackDown. It constantly goes back and forth. SmackDown has been by far the better show than Raw for most of 2021. Lately, it has not been good. So hopefully it improves as we head into 2022. At RJ_Marceau, my brother, his question was, who do you think will be a bigger star, Braun Breaker or Cora Jade? Great question. I gotta go Breaker. I mean, the interesting thing is that I feel like the women have a better shot of finding success than the men do from NXT. Just because the women's division is smaller and they don't really have a choice, they don't really have much of a choice to not put people like Cora Jade in the title picture. I mean, obviously it didn't work out well for Tegan Nox, who got fired, or Mia Yim. Ember Moon didn't do great. I mean, it's not a slam dunk, but it's much riskier for men to be called up because there's a bigger chance of them getting lost in the shuffle and not being booked correctly. Braun Breaker, though, is the exception in that Vince is currently involved in NXT. I don't see Braun Breaker absolutely going on to be a star. He absolutely should be, but there's never any guarantees in this company. I learned my lesson after Black and Nakamura and Balor and people like that, where I said, there is no way they call these people up and fuck them up. And they did anyway. They did anyway. They fired Black. Balor isn't as important as he should be, and same with Nakamura. Braun Breaker should be the exception. With Vince's current involvement in NXT and knowing what Breaker's capable of, he's a young guy, he's got that family history, he's very good in the ring, he's got a lot of that raw potential. Hopefully he's a guy that can break through, but even the most WWE of WWE guys, like a Braun Strowman or a Bray Wyatt, they still find ways to fuck up. They still find ways to fuck those people up, even if they're not indie guys, which he's not. He's been wrestling for all of a year. That's amazing. But I'm going to go Braun Breaker. And then Cora Jade has a very high ceiling for success as well, so if you argued her, I wouldn't argue with that. She gives me major AJ Lee vibes, which is fitting because she grew up a major fan of AJ Lee. There was that footage that came out from that CM Punk documentary 5 years ago of her meeting CM Punk and calling him her idol. So she's a big Punk fan, a big AJ Lee fan. So she kind of follows, to me, that AJ Lee vibe. She gives me those AJ Lee vibes. And so far, they've booked her well in NXT. She's picked up a couple of notable wins, upset victories. She pinned Mandy Rose a couple of weeks ago. She won at War Games. She's off to a good start. She's good in the ring, and she's only 20. She's as good as she is, and she's still improving, and she's only 20. So I think both of them have very bright futures. If I had to pick one over the other, I would go Breaker, but Jade is a very bright future as well. Final two questions for the episode. At E13A, do you think NXT will continue doing War Games? I do. If you asked me 3 months ago if I saw War Games coming back this year with no takeovers, I would say no. I felt like that was a Triple H thing. If Triple H has not been involved in the product lately, and it's mostly Vince and Bruce, and obviously Shawn as well, Vince never liked War Games. That was why they never incorporated it into the main roster product up until NXT brought it back in 2017. That being said, I was very shocked when they kept it. So if they kept it this year, it was still a success. It worked out well. I mean, I could also see them getting rid of it next year. This year kind of worked out well, the whole NXT 2.0 versus NXT Black and Gold thing. That was a perfect story to tell. And even that, I felt it was forced initially, but they ended up working it out, having two great matches inside War Games. I think it will stick around. That's my guess. It was successful this year. It was well received. And if Vince wanted to do it this year, or whoever's involved in NXT right now, I see no reason why they wouldn't do it next year too. And then the final question, which I purposely saved for last because it's a great question, from at E13A. Push repackage release. We're bringing this one back, which I love. Adam Cole, Bryan Danielson, and CM Punk. That's an excellent question, and very tough too, because obviously Danielson and Punk are closer to the end of their careers than they are the beginning. And not that Cole is relatively new, but he's a lot younger than they are. Not a lot, but Cole's what, 33, 34? I don't think Danielson is 40 yet. If he is, he just turned 40. Punk's like 43 maybe. That being said, I feel of the three, Cole will be more valuable in the future than they will be because they won't be around for the next 15 years. I still got to go. This is tough. Release Adam Cole because I feel like Danielson and Punk are just much bigger stars and they're going to make more of a difference in AEW right now and for the foreseeable future than Cole will. And I love Cole, but I feel like you got to release Cole, push Danielson, and repackage Punk. Make Punk a heel at some point. He's doing great work as a babyface, as he should be a babyface right now. But turn him heel. He does even better work as a heel, I would argue. And then push Danielson. The guy's amazing. I mean, honestly, I don't think people would complain. I don't think he should beat Page, but I wouldn't be absolutely pissed because Danielson as a heel has been just a revelation. He's been fantastic. So Danielson in the top spot, I would not argue with. I mean, the guy has a couple of years left on his deal. I mean, he just came in, or a couple of years left in his career, he has said, in public interviews. But he should be, and hopefully will be at some point, a world champion again, because the guy is too good to not put the belt on again. I wouldn't do it next Wednesday, but I don't think it would be the worst thing ever. Page should get a long run, but Danielson pulling off the shock win like Omega did last, I mean, it wasn't really a shock win, but he was a heel. He turned heel. That was the big shocker, I guess. Would be interesting. So again, I would push Danielson, repackage Punk, and release Cole. It pains me to say that, but I feel like Danielson and Punk are just far bigger stars and are far more valuable right now to the product than Adam Cole is. And that's going to do it, guys, for this edition of #AskGSM, episode 419 for Wednesday, December 8th, 2021. Thank you, as always, for checking out these shows. I very much appreciate it. The holiday season is upon us. I can't thank you guys enough for your constant support of the show, of the channel, of me. It means a lot. We've had a great 2021 here on the channel, just in general. I've really enjoyed this year, and we're going to end it with a bang, with a lot of cool interviews. Like I said, Xia Li coming up on Friday here on the channel. More interviews I've recorded in the last week or so. All will be uploaded soon, so stay tuned for those. More Ruthless Aggression reviews, Broken Skull session reviews, Raw Talk reviews, Talking Smack, Hawkeye, even a Spider-Man review, hopefully at some point as well. Eternals coming soon as well. That movie already came out a month ago, but that review should be up at some point. Should be out at some point here on the channel. But with all that being said, guys, have an awesome one. Enjoy the rest of your week and holiday season. I'm Graham GSM Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.